Good morning, CLC, and welcome to today's daily devotion. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 9, and so far, what we've seen in 2 Samuel is that David has become king. He's officially sitting on the throne, ruling over all of Israel, and he's doing a great job. He's doing everything in God's name. He's fighting battles, he's conquering cities, and he's taking over kingdoms, and he's expanding his reign more and more. But what we see in chapter 9 is that David actually wants to keep honoring his agreement which he made with Jonathan and Saul, that he wouldn't kill off any of their bloodline. However, due to some previous circumstances, there have been deaths of sons that were killed by accident. There have been ones that were killed in wars. But David goes on in chapter 9 and he says this. He asks, "Is there anyone remaining from Saul's family I can show kindness to because of Jonathan?" Now, Jonathan was David's best friend, and it says that they actually had a relationship that was stronger, and David loved Jonathan. Jonathan loved David. They were closer than brothers. Even though they were from different households, they just had that really close bond together. And there was a servant of Saul's family named Ziba. They summoned him to David, and the king said, "Are you Ziba?" So the king asked, "Is there anyone left of Saul's family that I can show kindness of God to?" Ziba said to the king, "There is still Jonathan's son who is injured in both his feet." Now you remember when Saul's family was fleeing, Jonathan's son was being carried away by his nurse, and she dropped him and actually caused a spinal cord damage, and so he was paralyzed for the rest of his life. So he wasn't able to walk, he wasn't able to do anything. So she picked him up and she kept going, but that left him crippled for the rest of his life. And the king asked, "Where is he?" Ziba answered the king, "You'll find him at Lobar at the house of Machir, son of Amiel." So King David had him brought to the house of Machir, son of Amiel of Lodabar. Mephibosheth, the son of David, son of Saul, came to David, bowed to the ground, and paid homage. David said, "Mephibosheth." And he said, "I am your servant." So even then, Mephibosheth didn't want to pull in Jonathan's name or Saul's name. He had humbled himself. Yes, he was crippled. He still managed to bow to the king. He still showed him respect and honor, even though, again, they were from rival households. They were from different lineages. But Mephibosheth made sure that David knew that he cared about him, that he respected him as his ruler. And David said, "Don't be afraid, since I intend to show you kindness because of your father Jonathan. I will restore you and your grandfather Saul's fields, and you will always eat meals at my table." So he wanted to make sure that Mephibosheth felt honored. He felt like even though he wasn't from the same family, they were still family. So you know how you always have those friends that are just close. You consider them family. And even during this time, the pandemic, you'll bring them over to your house and you'll hug them and you'll love on them. And then there's other friends oh, okay, we're going to stay our 6 feet apart. We're going to be fine and everything like that. But there's always those people in your life that you consider close, like family. And this is exactly how David was going to treat Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you take an interest in a dead dog like me?" And the king summoned Saul's attendant Ziba and said to him, "I have given to your master's grandson all that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to work the ground for him, and you are to bring in the crops, for your master's grandson will have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, is always to eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. And Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do all my lord the king commands." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table just like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. All those living in Ziba's house were Mephibosheth's servants. However, Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table, and his feet had been injured. And so even though he was crippled, even though he couldn't do a lot of things on his own, David still felt the need to respect him, to make sure that he felt honored, that he was respected as a person, that he didn't feel like he was cast away because of what had happened to him, that he still felt like he was a man, that he was going to be treated like a human being, not just cast away because he was crippled. So what we really can pull from this is that David honored the past. He honored the past agreement that he had with the family of Saul, with Jonathan, and then he also respected the person that was represented by his enemy. Saul and David, they had this terrible relationship between them because Saul knew that David was going to take over, and he feared it. He didn't want it. He didn't want to be replaced, but the Spirit of God was with David. And so they had battled, they had fought, they had done everything, but ultimately God's will prevailed and David became the king. And so David wanted to make sure that, hey, I'm going to make sure that this lineage, this family, even though I'm taking over, they're going to be loved, they're going to be respected, they're going to be taken care of, they're not going to be killed, their lineage is not going to be destroyed, and I'm going to preserve it as best as possible. And so he continues to do that, and he does that, and he honors Mephibosheth. So we need to honor the people that God puts in our lives too. We might not always agree with the reason that they're there, but we can do our best to make sure that every person knows that they are loved and respected and honored by God. Thank you so much for joining us for today's devotion. We hope you have a good day. God bless you.